When my sister told me, "This wedding is for people who matter, you can stay home," I didn't react the way she expected. I didn't argue, didn't defend myself, didn't remind her of everything I'd done for her growing up. I just smiled, a quiet, steady smile that caught her off guard, because deep down I knew this wasn't really about a wedding. It was about something that had been building for years, something that had finally reached a boiling point. And maybe, just maybe, this time I was ready to stop pretending everything was fine. I remember standing there with my phone in my hand, staring at her message. My sister, the bride-to-be, the one everyone always called the golden child, had officially pushed me out of her perfect little event. And she did it with the same cold confidence she'd mastered over the years. In her mind, I didn't belong. I wasn't important enough. Not for photos, not for speeches, not for her carefully curated dream day. At first, I felt that familiar punch in my chest, the one I'd felt every time she dismissed me, overshadowed me, or made me feel like I was just background noise in my own family. But this time, something else rose up inside me. It wasn't anger exactly. It was clarity. A strange, refreshing clarity that made me stand straighter and breathe deeper. I knew I mattered even if she didn't see it. I knew I had every right to show up, not just as a sibling, but as a human being who had never once wished her harm. So I decided I wouldn't stay home. Not this time. I would show up, calm, confident, and fully myself. Not to cause a scene, not to confront her, but simply to exist in the space she tried to push me out of. But deciding it and doing it were two different things. The days leading up to the wedding were awkward in that silent way only family tension can create. My mother didn't bring it up, but I could tell she knew something was wrong. Every time she spoke about the wedding plans, flowers, seating charts, the dress rehearsal, her voice would tighten just a little. She was caught between her two children, the same tug of war she tried to avoid our entire lives. My father, on the other hand, didn't hide his disappointment. When I told him what my sister had said, his face fell in a way I hadn't seen before. He quietly muttered, "She shouldn't have said that," but he didn't push any further. That was his way, correct the behavior in a whisper and hope it disappears. But this wasn't disappearing. The morning of the wedding arrived quicker than I expected. I woke up earlier than usual, feeling oddly calm. I didn't have an invitation, a seat assignment, or even the slightest hint that I was welcome. But I didn't need any of that. I wasn't going to take attention from her big day. I just wanted to be present, even if only on the sidelines. I picked out the simplest outfit I owned, something respectful, something neutral, and took extra time getting ready. Not to impress anyone but to remind myself that I deserved to be treated with dignity, even if my sister couldn't see it. Every time I looked in the mirror, I repeated one soft sentence in my head: "You matter." It was something I'd never said to myself before. As I drove to the venue, memories flooded back to me. Childhood moments where I had cheered her on while she never once looked in my direction. Times when I went out of my way to make her feel special, while she barely acknowledged my existence. Birthdays where she stole the spotlight, arguments where she twisted the story, holidays where she made sure everyone noticed her and not me. For years I let it slide. For years I told myself, that's just how she is. But this wedding, this moment, felt like the final straw. And somewhere in the quiet spaces between heartbreak and acceptance, I realized that I wasn't the problem. I was never the problem. When I pulled into the parking lot, my hands tightened around the steering wheel. Cars filled every corner of the place. Crisp decorations lined the walkway leading to the entrance. People were dressed beautifully, greeting one another with warm hugs and bright smiles. It was everything a wedding should be, joyful, loud, and full of the people she said mattered. I stepped out of my car slowly, my heart thumping just a little harder now. I wasn't nervous about seeing her. I was nervous about what this moment represented. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't rebellion. It was closure. A quiet reclaiming of everything she tried to take from me. As I walked toward the building, a few relatives glanced my way. Some gave friendly nods, others looked surprised like they weren't expecting to see me. I didn't blame them. My sister had probably made it clear that I wouldn't be attending. Knowing her, she might have spun a neat little story about why. I reached the entrance doors, took one breath, and pushed them open. Inside, the air buzzed with excitement. Soft music played in the background. Guests took their seats. Flowers soaked the room in subtle perfume. Everything looked carefully arranged, perfect, polished, just like my sister always wanted. And then I saw her. Standing near the front, dressed in her stunning white gown, she looked exactly like the sister I grew up with. Beautiful. Sure. Controlled. The center of attention, soaking in every compliment. the kind of person who believed the world revolved around her orbit. She hadn't seen me yet. For a moment I stood still, hidden in the crowd, watching her. Watching the family who seemed so at ease around her. Watching the version of life where I didn't exist. And then, slowly, her eyes lifted. They landed on me. Her smile froze. Her posture shifted just slightly. A flash of something, confusion, irritation, maybe even panic, crossed her face before she masked it with her usual perfect composure. But I saw it. I felt it. She didn't expect me here. She didn't want me here. And yet here I was. For the first time in years, I held her gaze without looking away. I didn't shrink the way I used to. I didn't break under her silent judgment. I simply stood there, calm and steady, the same way I had when she told me to stay home. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know what she would say. I didn't know how the rest of the family would react. All I knew was that this moment, this single silent moment, was about to change everything. And then she started walking toward me. Slowly. Deliberately. Expression unreadable. I took one quiet breath as she approached, bracing myself for whatever came next. Because the real story was just beginning. My sister stopped just a few feet in front of me, her dress glimmering under the soft lights. Up close, she looked flawless, but there was a tightness in her expression she couldn't hide. For a second, neither of us said anything. It was strange, almost unreal, seeing her in this moment, dressed in white, surrounded by everything she ever wanted, yet bothered by the one thing she thought she had removed from her perfect day, me. She leaned in just slightly, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "What are you doing here?" Her tone wasn't angry, but it wasn't welcoming either. More like she couldn't decide which version of herself she wanted to be with me. I kept my voice soft. "I came to see you get married." Her eyes flicked to the crowd, watching to see if anyone was paying attention. They weren't. Everyone was busy talking, laughing, finding their seats. She looked back at me a little frustrated, a little unsure. I could see her trying to maintain control the same way she had since we were kids. Growing up, my sister always needed everything to go her way. She had this natural ability to draw people in. Teachers loved her, friends clung to her, even strangers sensed her charisma. And I was the quiet one. The one who blended in. The one who people appreciated but never spotlighted. Our parents never said they favored her, but I could feel it sometimes in the small things. They bragged more about her accomplishments, worried more about her feelings, and adjusted the world so she could shine. I didn't resent her for it. Not back then. I thought that was just how families worked. Some people sparkled louder than others. But as we got older, the difference became harder to ignore. She grew more controlling, more protective of her image, and more sensitive to anything she felt threatened her place as the center of attention. She didn't like being questioned, didn't like being challenged, and didn't like sharing the spotlight, especially not with me. Even if I wasn't trying to compete, she acted like I was. I remember her sweet 16 party. She made me change my dress twice because she said the colors clashed with her theme. At her graduation, she asked me to stay out of photos because she wanted clean, aesthetic memories. When I got my first job, she didn't congratulate me. She questioned why I chose something so ordinary. It was always like that, her importance, my invisibility. So when she excluded me from the wedding, it wasn't out of character. It was just the biggest version of the same story she'd been writing for years. But standing here, face to face with her while guests buzzed around us, I felt something shift. Like everything we'd ignored or brushed aside was finally rising to the surface. She glanced over her shoulder again and touched her hair like she was trying to regain composure. "You should have told me you were coming," she whispered. "You told me not to," I replied gently. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. That surprised me. My sister always argued when she felt cornered. But right now she seemed almost uncertain. Maybe even a little scared. Like she knew she had crossed a line but wasn't ready to admit it. Before she could respond, a bridesmaid rushed over, calling her name. "We need you for photos. The photographer's ready." My sister straightened instantly, slipping back into her polished bride persona. She gave me one last look, something unreadable flickering in her eyes, before turning away. I stood there watching her walk back into the center of the room, surrounded by people who had no idea how many layers she hid beneath that confident surface. As she posed for photos, smiling and tilting her head perfectly, I moved quietly to the side of the room, staying out of the way. I didn't want to ruin anything. I didn't want drama. I just wanted to understand why this moment felt different, heavier. It wasn't just her comment anymore. It was something deeper, something that felt like a breaking point. A cousin approached me, smiling warmly. "I'm glad you came. We didn't know if you would." I simply nodded. I didn't want to start explaining anything. Not yet. As more guests arrived, I watched how everyone interacted with my sister. They adored her, of course. They complimented her dress, her hair, her glow. And she soaked it all in like she always did. But every few minutes she would glance over at me, quick, sharp looks, like she was checking to see if I planned to cause trouble. I didn't look away. I didn't flinch. I just met her eyes calmly every time. Maybe that's what unsettled her the most. I wasn't playing my old role anymore. While I stood there observing, pieces of our past kept coming back to me, the little arguments, the subtle digs, the way she'd always made sure I felt one step behind her. People on the outside thought we were close because we were siblings. But closeness requires effort from both sides, and she never offered that. Still, I had tried. I had always tried. Even when she didn't show up for me. The lights dimmed slightly, signaling guests to take their seats. I slipped into a chair near the back. Not hidden, but not noticeable either. The perfect place for someone who wasn't supposed to matter. The music began, soft and elegant. The wedding planner guided everyone into place. And as the ceremony started, I felt that strange tension growing again. It wasn't the wedding itself, it was her. Something was off. Her smiles weren't reaching her eyes. Her shoulders were a little too stiff. Even the bridesmaids looked nervous around her. Then, as she stood at the entrance ready to walk down the aisle, she looked at me one more time, just for a second. But the look wasn't annoyance this time. It wasn't anger or superiority. It was fear. Real fear. And I didn't understand why. Not yet. The ceremony continued, beautiful and smooth on the surface. But underneath, something felt like it was shifting, tightening, preparing to break. My sister kept glancing toward the back, toward me, even when she wasn't supposed to. People whispered among themselves softly, probably assuming she was emotional because weddings made everyone sentimental. But I saw her. I knew her. This wasn't emotion. This was panic she was trying to hide. As the vows began, a sudden wave of whispers swept through the guests. Heads turned slightly. A few people stood. Something was happening near the entrance, something quiet yet unsettling. I leaned forward in my seat trying to see. My sister noticed the movement in the crowd too. She hesitated mid-sentence, her voice trailing off as she tried to catch a glimpse of whatever was happening behind her. I couldn't see clearly yet, but I could feel the atmosphere changing, heavy, tense, uncertain. Something or someone had arrived. Someone who wasn't on the guest list. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. And whatever was unfolding, I had a feeling it was connected to me, or to her, or to something we both didn't want exposed. Before I could make sense of it, my sister's face drained of color completely. Her eyes widened. Her hands trembled around her bouquet. Her breath caught in her throat. Whatever she saw, it wasn't good. And the wedding, her perfect, carefully crafted wedding, was about to unravel right in front of everyone. The moment my sister's face went pale, the whole room seemed to shift. Even the music felt quieter, like it sensed something was wrong. The guests turned their heads toward the entrance, whispering softly, trying to understand why the bride looked like she'd just seen something impossible. I leaned slightly to the side, trying to get a clearer view, but from where I sat, I could only make out scattered silhouettes. Still, whatever, or whoever, had arrived was shaking her in a way I had never seen before. Not even during our worst arguments. Not even when things spiraled between us behind closed doors. This was something different. My sister's groom placed a hand on her arm, whispering, "Are you okay?" But she didn't answer. Her eyes were glued to the back of the room, wide and unblinking. She looked like she was trying to hold herself together, like one wrong word would shatter her entirely. The officiant cleared his throat, unsure whether to continue. Guests shifted awkwardly in their seats. And I could feel it, something was unraveling in slow motion. Then a familiar voice caught my attention. Soft, hesitant, out of place in a setting like this. I didn't think she'd actually show up. I turned to see my aunt slipping into the seat beside me. She spoke quietly, but her words carried weight, like she knew something the rest of us didn't. "Who?" I whispered. She didn't answer right away. Instead, her eyes stayed fixed on the entrance. "Your sister has been hiding things," she murmured. "A lot of things. We all knew it would catch up with her eventually." I frowned, confused. Hidden things? From who? About what? Before I could ask more, a wave of murmurs rose again. Slowly the crowd parted like something, or someone, needed room. And then, finally, I saw her. An older woman wearing a deep navy dress stepped into view. She wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic, wasn't doing anything to draw attention. But her presence alone commanded the entire room. Her eyes were sharp, her posture straight, and there was something in the way she held herself, like she believed she had every right to be here. My sister's breath hitched. The groom followed her stare, confused. "Who is that?" he asked. But my sister didn't respond. She couldn't. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. The woman walked further into the room, moving slowly, confidently, until she reached the row of seats near the aisle. She didn't sit. She didn't smile. She just stood there, watching the bride with a quiet intensity that made the air heavy. I had never seen her before. She wasn't family. She wasn't a friend. Yet she looked at my sister as if she knew her deeply, maybe even painfully. The officiant tried again to continue the ceremony, but he hesitated when he noticed half the room wasn't paying attention anymore. The tension was thick, impossible to ignore. My aunt leaned closer to me. "She wasn't supposed to be here." "Who is she?" I whispered again. "Someone your sister hoped would never show up," my aunt replied, her tone low and uneasy. "Someone from before." "Before what? Before the wedding? Before adulthood? Before the family turned into this strange shape where I was always on the outside?" Nobody explained. And that made the moment even heavier. Then the woman spoke, calm, steady, firm. "We need to talk," she said, her voice directed at my sister. The groom stepped in front of her, confused and protective. "Ma'am, can we help you?" But she didn't look at him. Her eyes never left the bride. "You told me this would never happen again," she said. "You promised." My sister flinched. Actual fear flashed across her face. Promises? Secrets? Hidden past? This wasn't just drama. This was history. Deep, old, buried history. My sister finally managed to speak, but her voice shook. "Not here," she whispered. "Please. Not today." The woman's jaw tightened. She didn't move closer, but her words cut through the room like a blade. "You think hiding the truth protects you? You think pushing people away will make it disappear?" My heart thudded harder. Pushing people away. That part hit too close. I wasn't the only one she had shut out. Maybe I was just the easiest. Guests were staring openly now. The groom looked completely lost. His parents exchanged confused glances. And the bridesmaids looked terrified, as if they knew exactly what was happening, but hoped it would stay buried. Then one of the bridesmaids, my sister's closest friend, moved toward her with a panicked expression. "Do you want us to take her outside?" she whispered urgently. My sister shook her head. "No. No, don't touch her." She swallowed hard. "Just give me a second." Her voice sounded small, smaller than I'd ever heard it. She looked like a child who had been caught in something she swore she would never do again. My aunt whispered, "This is about the past. Something she didn't tell any of you." The past. What past? What was my sister hiding so badly that seeing one person nearly broke her? But the moment I thought that, another thought formed, one that sat heavy in my chest. Why did the woman glance at me? Just for a split second. But she did. Like she recognized me. Like I was somehow connected to all of this. My sister noticed too. Her eyes widened and she took a shaky step forward, almost in panic. "Don't talk to her," she said sharply to the woman. "Please. Don't involve her." My stomach dropped. Why me? Why was she scared of me hearing something? What could possibly tie me to this woman, to this past, to this moment? The groom looked between all of us, completely thrown. "Can someone explain what is going on?" But no one did. The woman folded her hands calmly in front of her. "You've been pretending for years," she said to my sister. "Pretending none of this happened. Pretending you're the only one who matters." That last part hit me deeper than I expected. "And now," she continued, "you're trying to erase the one person who deserved better from you." My breath caught. Erase who? Me? Someone else? Someone I didn't even know existed? My sister looked like she was about to break, her shoulders trembling, her lips pressed tightly together, her eyes glassy with something between guilt and desperation. The officiant finally stepped back, unsure what role he played anymore. The guests whispered louder. The groom's parents stood up, clearly distressed. And I felt something rising inside me. Not anger. Not even hurt. Just a growing certainty that everything I thought I knew about my sister, about our relationship, about our family, was only the visible layer. There was more. Something buried. Something affecting all of this. Her treatment of me, her fear today, her need to control everything. And whatever that secret was, it was big enough to interrupt her wedding. The woman's eyes softened, but her voice stayed firm. "It's time," she said quietly. "You can't run from this anymore." My sister's knees seemed to buckle for a moment before she steadied herself. And just as she opened her mouth to speak, the venue doors opened again. Everyone turned. and the next person who walked in stopped the entire room. When the doors opened again, the air in the room shifted so sharply it felt like a physical force pushing against everyone's chest. People turned in their seats, some lifting their phones slightly but stopping themselves, unsure if this moment was meant to be captured or forgotten. Even the music, which had been humming faintly through the speakers, seemed to fade into nothing. The man who stepped inside didn't come in loud or dramatic. He walked slowly, uncertainly, like he wasn't even sure he belonged there. Yet every eye in the room locked onto him. His suit was slightly wrinkled, like he'd been rushing or arguing with himself in the car about coming in at all. His expression was tight with a mix of determination and fear. And the moment my sister saw him, she stopped breathing. Literally, she froze, her shoulders lifting, her hands curling around her bouquet, her face draining of every last bit of color she had left. If she looked shaken before, this was something else entirely. This wasn't guilt. This wasn't shock. This was terror. The older woman in the navy dress turned toward him, and even her composure slipped a little. "You came," she whispered, almost as if she couldn't believe it. The man didn't answer. His eyes went straight to my sister, locking onto her like they had unfinished business, heavy, complicated business. The groom stepped slightly in front of her, protective again, but he was clearly confused. "Who is he?" he asked, sounding more nervous now. My sister didn't speak. She couldn't. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked like her mind was racing, trying to calculate the fallout of all the hidden pieces now standing in the open. The older woman stepped closer to him, lowering her voice. "You don't have to do this in front of everyone." But he shook his head. "She left me no choice." A thick wave of silence spread across the room. Guests exchanged confused glances, some leaning toward each other, others sitting completely still like one wrong movement would break the tension holding the room together. I didn't know who this man was. I had never seen him in my life. But something about the way he looked at my sister, hurt mixed with something deeper, made my stomach clench. My aunt beside me exhaled quietly. "Oh no," she whispered. "Not him." My head snapped toward her. "You know him?" She hesitated, eyes darting around the room. I hoped he wouldn't come. I hoped she had ended this privately. And did what? What was my sister involved in? What was happening right now? Up at the front, my sister finally tried to speak, her voice thin and trembling. Please don't do this here." But he took another step forward. "You pushed me out of your life once. You said we'd never cross paths again. I respected that. I walked away. But now you're pretending none of it happened. Pretending like you can start fresh without telling the truth." The groom turned sharply, looking between the two of them. What truth? My sister squeezed her eyes shut like the question physically hurt her. When she opened them again, her gaze flicked briefly toward me, quick but full of something I didn't understand. Regret? Shame? Fear? The man continued, his voice cracking slightly. "You think your image, your reputation, this perfect wedding, you think all of that matters more than what happened? More than us?" The groom's face stiffened. "Us?" My sister's breath hitched again. She shook her head desperately. "It wasn't like that. It wasn't." The older woman stepped in, placing a hand on the man's arm. "You're upset. But don't forget why we came. This isn't about ruining her day." He pulled his arm away. "But she ruined mine." The words echoed. My sister flinched as if struck. And something in my chest tightened. I didn't know the details, but I could feel the weight of it. The mess, the hidden conflict, the years of emotion compressed into a single moment. And yet, in the middle of all this chaos, there was still something else beneath the surface, something connecting all these pieces back to her desperation to keep me away. The groom took a step closer to my sister. His voice dropped. "You told me you didn't have anything like this in your past." She stared at him, tears welling in her eyes. I know what I said. I know how this looks. But please just let me explain later." "Explain what?" he pressed. Her breathing quickened. "Not now." But now seemed to be exactly what the universe chose. The man at the back clenched his jaw. "She's lying to you." The groom tensed. "She lied to me," he added, bitterness creeping into his voice. "About everything." A few gasps spread through the rows. My sister shook her head fiercely. "That's not fair." "Fair?" he fired back. "You disappeared on me without saying a word. You left us, left everything, so you could build this perfect life without dealing with what happened." The older woman whispered something to him urgently, but he didn't stop. My aunt muttered under her breath, "This is going to explode." I felt my pulse racing. My mind spun in circles, trying to piece together what any of this had to do with me. Every few moments my sister's eyes flicked toward me again, haunted, nervous, pleading. Finally the groom's voice broke through the tension. "Tell me," he said softly to her. "Tell me the truth. Right now." She shook her head. "Not in front of everyone." "Why not?" he asked. "What are you so scared of?" Her gaze swept the crowd, family, friends, co-workers, then landed on me again, lingering longer this time. Her expression twisted in a way I'd never seen. It was almost apologetic. The older woman took a step forward. "Maybe she should tell the truth," she said softly. "She's kept it hidden long enough." My sister choked out a breath. "Please stop." The man at the back swallowed hard. His voice dropped, but it carried through the room. "You owe people the truth. Especially her." The room froze. Oh, me. My heart kicked in my chest. My hands tightened around the fabric of my dress. My sister's eyes widened in full panic now. "No," she whispered. "Please. Not her. Not today." But the man didn't back down. "She deserves to know." Every guest turned to look at me now. Even the groom. Heat flushed up my neck. My pulse thrummed loudly. I could feel the weight of the entire room pressing onto my shoulders. My aunt put a trembling hand on mine, like she knew something I didn't. Something she had kept quiet too. My sister stepped forward, arms out slightly, as if she could shield me from something invisible. "Don't bring her into this," she said, her voice cracking. "This isn't her burden." The older woman shook her head. "It became her burden the moment you made the choice you did." My chest tightened. "What choice?" I whispered, almost afraid to hear the answer. My sister turned to me slowly, tears spilling down her face now. "I didn't want you to ever find out," she whispered. "Not like this." The man added quietly, painfully, "But you deserve the truth." The guests watched in stunned silence. The officiant stepped back entirely. The groom looked like he might faint. And I sat there, heart pounding, suddenly aware that my entire life, my entire understanding of my family, my sister, myself, was about to be flipped upside down. Because whatever they were all hinting at, it wasn't small. It wasn't simple. It wasn't something that could be undone. And in the seconds before anyone spoke again, the room held its breath, waiting for the truth that would change everything. The second I stepped out of that building, I felt the air shift around me, like the world knew something had changed, but I wasn't sure if it was for better or worse. I had barely processed what I'd just heard when my phone buzzed again. It was another unknown number, but this time the message wasn't a threat. It was a location pin. No words. No name. Just coordinates. And somehow that felt even worse. My stomach tightened because I knew this wasn't random. Someone was pulling strings behind the scenes, and I was walking deeper into their hands without knowing who they were. I didn't go straight there. I walked around the block twice, watching reflections in windows, checking shadows, trying to calm the storm building in my chest. Every step felt like the ground could split beneath me. The tension around everything, my family, the missing money, the lies, they all felt like they were tightening at once. And now this? Another layer I didn't see coming. When I finally arrived at the spot, it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a dark alley or an abandoned lot. It was a quiet street near a row of office buildings, the kind of place you'd never look twice at. But at the corner, leaning against a car, was someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Someone who was never supposed to be involved in any of this. My cousin Talia. She looked at me like she'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. Her arms were crossed, her jaw tight, her eyes scanning my face like she was trying to figure out whether to tell me the truth or turn around and walk away. I hadn't seen her since the fallout in our family years ago, the argument that split everyone apart. She'd disappeared from the picture, and everyone acted like she didn't exist anymore. Now here she was, showing up when my life was falling apart. Again. Before I could even ask, she shook her head. "You're not ready for everything yet," she said quietly, her voice steady in a way that made my heart beat uneven. "But if you don't know this part now, you're going to walk into something you can't get out of." My chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" She glanced around, then opened the car door, motioning for me to get in. I hesitated because this felt too sudden, too connected, too dangerous. But something in her face, something I recognized from childhood, the honesty she carried even when it hurt, made me trust her. At least for the moment. Inside the car, she didn't start driving. She kept her hands on the wheel, breathing slowly. "The person you think is behind this isn't the real one. They're part of it, yes. But the one calling the shots? There's someone you don't expect." A chill crawled down my spine. I didn't want to believe her, but the way she said it, the heaviness in her tone, made it impossible to brush off. It felt like the story I thought I was living had layers I hadn't even peeled back yet. She reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small envelope. My name was written on it, but not in her handwriting. I recognized it instantly. It was the same handwriting they used to label birthday gifts, school project posters, and notes tucked into lunch bags. My mother's handwriting. I froze, completely still, because I didn't understand how this made sense. My mother had passed away years ago. Nothing from her should exist that I didn't already know about. And yet here it was, an envelope clearly meant for me. My breath shook as I stared at it, unable to reach for it, scared of what was inside, scared of what it meant. "Talia," I whispered, "where did you get this?" She looked away. "I didn't get it. It was given to me by someone who's been waiting for the right moment for you to find out the truth." The world felt like it tilted sideways. Everything I thought I understood about the main conflict, who betrayed me, who stole from me, who lied to me, suddenly felt incomplete. And now, there was a link to my mother, something hidden all these years. It didn't make sense. It shouldn't make sense. When I finally picked up the envelope, my fingers trembled. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Not yet. The weight of it felt like it could split everything in my life open. Before I could ask anything else, Talia leaned closer and lowered her voice. "You're being watched," she said. "Right now. Every step you've taken these past few days, they know. And if you think you're close to the end, you're not. You're right in the middle of what they planned." A pressure built in my chest as the reality of her words hit me. Someone was tracking my moves, controlling the timing, leading me to certain places. And I had walked into all of it without realizing. I swallowed hard. "Who is doing this?" She stared straight ahead, her jaw tightening again. "The same person who made sure that envelope didn't reach you years ago. The same person who's been manipulating everything behind the scenes. Someone who's closer to you than you think." My heart hammered. There was only one question left in my throat, heavy and sharp. Why now? Why reveal a second twist when everything was already spiraling? As if she heard my unspoken question, Talia finally turned to look at me again. "Because they're afraid," she said slowly. "You got too close to something by accident. Something they've been hiding for a long time. And now they're trying to control the outcome before you uncover everything." Her words settled into my chest like a stone I couldn't lift. Then she whispered, "You're not fighting the person you think you are. The real enemy is someone with your blood." The car felt colder. The world felt smaller. And for the first time, I realized the story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about history, secrets, and a family war I didn't know I'd inherited. The stakes had just doubled, and I wasn't prepared for any of it. When I finally opened the envelope, the car felt too quiet, like even the air was waiting to see what would happen next. The paper inside was old, edges soft, the ink slightly faded. My mother's handwriting ran across the page in a shaky line that made my chest tighten. She wrote about something she'd hidden years ago, something she'd been afraid would tear the family apart if it ever came out. She said she tried to fix things quietly, but someone in the family stopped her every time, twisting her words and turning people against her. She begged me, if the letter ever reached me, not to trust the person who acted like a guardian but lived like a shadow. I didn't understand at first. Then one detail froze me. She mentioned dates and bank records, the same ones connected to the money that had gone missing recently. She even wrote a name, one she had scratched out halfway through, like she couldn't bring herself to finish. But I knew the handwriting well enough. I could read through the blur. It was my Aunt Lorraine. The realization hit so hard I had to steady myself. Lorraine had always been the calm one, the voice of reason, the one who stepped in after my mother passed and told everyone she just wanted to keep the family together. She'd been advising me through the financial mess too, pretending to help, pretending to guide me. And now, slowly, everything lined up. The documents that vanished, the threats, the sudden turns in the investigation. She wasn't just part of it. She was the one in control. I felt anger rise in my chest, but before I could say anything, Talia grabbed my arm. "You can't face her alone," she said. "She's been preparing for this moment for years." But I couldn't wait. I needed answers. I needed the truth from her mouth. We drove straight to Lorraine's house. The lights were on like she'd been expecting company. The door wasn't even locked. As soon as I stepped inside, she was already standing in the living room, hands folded, expression calm, as if she knew exactly what was coming. "I was wondering when you'd find that letter," she said softly. "Your mother always underestimated how far I would go." Her voice didn't shake. That scared me more than anything. "Why?" I asked. "Why take everything? Why drag me into this?" She smiled, small and cold. "Because your mother wasn't supposed to be the one leading the family. I was." But she married your father, then you came along and suddenly everything that was meant for me shifted to her. I spent my whole life watching her take what should have been mine. And when she tried to expose me, I made sure her voice didn't reach anyone. The words were sharp, calm, almost rehearsed. She admitted everything without hesitation. The manipulation, the forged signatures, the money she funneled away for years. She even admitted pushing me into a corner financially, hoping I'd come running for help just so she could control the outcome. But the real twist was still hidden in her expression. There was something else behind her eyes. You weren't supposed to find out this soon, she said. I had one last step. One final move. Before I could ask, footsteps echoed from the hallway. I turned and the breath left my chest. My father stepped out. Alive. Standing. Staring at me with eyes that carried too many years of secrets. I stumbled back, my mind spinning. He had been gone for years. Everyone said he passed quietly in his sleep. I mourned him. I grieved him. Yet here he was, looking older, thinner, but undeniably alive. I didn't know what to say. My voice barely came out. How, why? He didn't answer immediately. His eyes flickered toward Lorraine. She told everyone I was gone, he said finally. She hid me. Controlled me. She threatened everything I cared about. I wanted to protect you. I didn't know how to fight her without putting you at risk. Lorraine didn't even deny it. She lifted her chin slightly. He was going to expose me. And I couldn't let that happen. So I made him disappear in a way that no one questioned. I felt sick. My heartbeat was loud in my ears. Everything I knew about my life had just cracked open. The missing money, the years of manipulation, the strange gaps in family stories, it all came back to her. But now I saw what she didn't. She wasn't in control anymore. She had slipped. She had underestimated how far I would go. I pulled out my phone and played the recording app. I hadn't planned on recording her, but the app had been running from earlier after the threats started. Everything she just confessed was on it, clear, undeniable. Her face finally shifted. You don't know what you're doing. Yes, I said quietly, I do. Talia stepped beside me, reminding me I wasn't standing alone anymore. My father's eyes softened, filled with a relief he had probably been waiting years to feel. And just when Lorraine opened her mouth to defend herself, a loud knock hit the door. Firm. Commanding. Police. Talia had called them before we arrived, just in case. She had been a step ahead, watching every move. Lorraine's eyes darted between us, realizing the game she built so carefully was collapsing in seconds. She tried to speak, to twist the story like she always had, but it was too late. The officer stepped inside, and everything she confessed was enough to end her control for good. But right when I thought the story had given its last twist, my father quietly walked over to me and slipped another envelope into my hand. Smaller. Newer. This, he whispered, is the part no one else knows. Not even Lorraine. My fingers tightened around it. Another secret. Another truth waiting to open. Even with the main conflict resolved, I realized the story wasn't finished. Not completely. There was still one last piece of history waiting to reveal itself. When the officers led Lorraine out of the house, the air felt strangely still, like the world was waiting to see what came next. For the first time in years, her voice wasn't the loudest one in the room. She didn't get to twist anything or turn anyone against me. She didn't get to decide who mattered and who didn't. The woman who spent half her life pulling strings finally had none left to hold. As the door closed behind her, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. But when I looked down at the small envelope my father handed me, a new wave of emotion hit me. I wasn't sure if I was ready for another truth, but after everything, hiding from it wasn't an option. We sat together in the living room, the same room where everything had fallen apart, and somehow the same place where things were finally coming together. My father looked exhausted, like years of fear were slowly melting off him. Talia sat close to me, her hand steady on my knee. For once, I wasn't alone in the mess. I opened the envelope, expecting another painful confession or something heavy that would change everything all over again. Instead, inside was a photo and a short letter in my father's handwriting. The photo was old, creased at the corners. It showed my mother holding me as a baby, and beside her was my father smiling in a way I hadn't seen since childhood. On the back of the photo were just 2 words, for later. The letter was simple too. He wrote about how he and my mother had planned a future for me that was full of choices and freedom, not controlled by family politics or old grudges. They wanted me to grow up without feeling the weight of their generation's battles. He said keeping me out of the chaos was the reason they made certain decisions, even ones that didn't make sense from the outside. He wrote that when things went wrong and Lorraine started manipulating everything, he tried to protect me the only way he knew how. He didn't disappear because he wanted to, he disappeared because he had no choice. Every attempt to expose her would have put me in danger, and he couldn't risk losing me too. The letter wasn't some dramatic reveal or shocking twist. It was just the truth. Honest, steady, almost gentle. And maybe that's why it hit so hard. For years I wondered why my family felt broken in ways no one could explain. But now it made sense. My parents had been fighting a quiet war, one I never saw coming. When I finished reading, I looked at my father and finally understood the exhaustion in his eyes. He didn't just survive what Lorraine did, he survived the guilt of not being able to protect me the way he wanted. I leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around me like he'd been waiting years for that moment. It didn't erase the pain, but it softened it in a way I didn't expect. We spent the next few hours talking, really talking, for the first time in forever. He told me things he'd never been allowed to say before. How my mother had tried to expose Lorraine years ago. How she uncovered bank transfers and forged signatures. How she planned to speak up right before she passed, but something made her hesitate. Not fear, he said, but hope. She believed that maybe the family could heal if she didn't ignite a bigger fight. She didn't want her last days filled with conflict. She wanted peace even if it meant carrying the truth alone. It made me think about all the arguments I had with my mother growing up. Times I thought she was being too careful or too quiet. I never realized she was trying to shield me from a storm she'd been weathering for years. Losing her already hurt, but now there was a deeper sadness knowing she carried so much without ever burdening me. But there was pride too, pride that she was stronger than anyone ever gave her credit for. Once things calmed down, the officers came back to update us. Lorraine had already started trying to rewrite the story at the station, but the recording and the letter from my mother painted the picture clearly. There was no twisting her way out of years of manipulation. The missing money, the threats, the deception, they had enough evidence to start the legal process. The officer reassured us that she wouldn't be coming back to finish what she started. Later that night, after everything was taken care of, Talia drove us home. The streets were quieter than usual, like the whole city was taking a breath with me. I leaned my head against the window, thinking about how differently the day could have ended. I thought about my sister's wedding message months ago, the one where she told me people who matter were the only ones invited. Back then, I had no idea those words would be the start of everything unraveling. Funny how life works. One message can be the spark that exposes every hidden truth. I realized then that my sister had only repeated what she'd been taught. Lorraine had shaped her thinking for years. The bitterness, the distance, the judgment, it all came from the same source. And even though her words hurt deeply, I knew she wasn't the real villain. She was another person caught in the line of fire without knowing it. It didn't excuse her actions, but it helped me understand them. A week later, after things settled, I met with my sister. The conversation wasn't dramatic or explosive. She cried before I even said anything, apologizing for the wedding comment, apologizing for believing lies, apologizing for not questioning things sooner. I listened quietly, letting her speak until she ran out of breath. Then I took her hand and told her something simple. We can start over, but it has to be honest this time. We agreed to take it slowly, to rebuild what was broken piece by piece. Not because we owed it to the past, but because we wanted a different future. A future not controlled by secrets or manipulation. A future we could build ourselves. As for my father, he moved in with me for a while. Not because he needed a place to stay, but because we needed time to reconnect, to understand each other beyond the shadows Lorraine cast over us. Every morning we started with coffee and stories, ones he hadn't been allowed to tell me before. I got pieces of my childhood back, pieces of my mother, pieces of myself. And somewhere in all of it, I learned something important about family. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Love doesn't always come from the places you expect. And sometimes the people who try to silence you are the ones most afraid of your strength. In the end, I realized I didn't just uncover a secret. I reclaimed my voice. I reclaimed my place in my own story. And for the first time in years, the future felt like it belonged to me again, not controlled by anyone else's plan. The last thing I did was place my mother's photo, creased, old, warm with memories, on my dresser. Every morning I look at it and remember the promise she and my father made long ago. A promise that no matter how dark things got, the truth would always find its way. It finally did. And now, I can move forward with clarity, with peace, and with the strength to never let anyone decide my worth again.